For today's painting, I'm going to be doing a mountain landscape with a lake and reflections. Not something I do very often, but I thought it'd be cool and to see how it goes. So straight away, I try and block in the sky, same as always. I struggled choosing the actual color this time. I generally do struggle picking the sky color. But we're just blocking a simple blue. Anything will do. We can change it later. But we blast in some mountains. Make sure not to have too many peaks. And always have a dominating one. And make sure that it's not right in the middle. So it's kind of something we do a lot, is put things in the middle. So just move it to the left or the right. And it's a little bit symmetrical, actually, the big mountain. But we can get away with it. So all I'm trying to do for now is block in the big shapes. Again, I'm not too worried about the colors. We can change those later. The values are important. Oh, by the way, this video is running at 2 speed. I haven't edited anything out other than when I'm taking a break and I'm not doing anything. So I try to leave in mistakes, and we'll get to those in a minute. There's quite a few of them, which is fine. To be honest, when I started this a year ago, there was a lot more mistakes, so I'm not too worried about showing those. So I'm still trying to just block in shapes. The values are more important than the colors, so make sure things are probably darker than what you'd think they should be, because you can always lightening them up with color over the top is quite easy. You can't really put dark over it. I mean, you're gonna have to adjust the hue and saturation otherwise, but go darker. So I'm just trying to make nice shapes. This is what I'm doing always with this stage. Until I add detail, it's all about the shapes. I can't stress that enough. It is literally about the shapes of everything. It doesn't need to look exactly like a tree, but it needs to have tree shapes, and which means it needs curves, straight, negative space, which we can get onto in detail, but negative space is massively important. So it's the shapes are the actual shape of the color and what kind of shape it makes around itself. I know that probably doesn't make much sense, but it will eventually. Okay, so I'm doing a little bit more detail in now. I'm trying to just make, with all these little details, what we're doing here is trying to add depth. So there's a concept called overlapping in landscape painting, which tricks us into thinking it's a lot. The distance is a lot more than it really is. So basically, I just want to put more shapes over other shapes, etc., until there's so much overlapping that it looks like the distance is huge. It's a simple trick and it works very well. But you have to have it or it'll look flat. So one thing I used to do as a beginner, which is a big mistake, is to not overlap, and you try very neat and you line things up. So make sure you don't do that, and don't listen to your brain. Make sure things go over other things. So I'm into phase 2, I think I would call it, where I either alpha lock the layer I'm on, or I create a new layer and turn clip and mask on, which means it sticks to the layer below. The reason I do one or the other is if I'm not sure I want to keep the layer, or I'm not sure if I want to mess with the colors, I'll create a new layer. If I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to do that, I'll leave it on the same layer and just alpha lock it. The reason being is that I don't like having too many layers, because I get lost and forget which layer is which. And you'll see actually later in this video, I lose a bunch of layers and I don't always layer them on. And I have too many anyway. The only real reason to keep layers is so you can adjust them. I try to not adjust constantly because I try and stick to my decisions that I make, and it doesn't really matter if they're wrong as such. It's more that I'd rather learn how to make my instincts correct the first time. Now, if you have to keep on editing all the time, it's just not as fun. So yeah, so I try and keep the layers to the minimum. One thing about snow, so I'm just about to do the shadow snow on the mountain. It's if depending on your color scheme, obviously, if we're doing normal snow, which is white or whatever, we got on the shadow side, the snow is always blue. It's reflecting the sky is why it's blue. So it's not because it's blue. If your sky was orange, then the reflective snow would also be orange. So be careful with that. The environment changes snow massively. So snow is highly reflective, and it just takes the environment. So keep that in mind. Of course, you can change the color later. So again, wouldn't worry too much about it. For this painting, I didn't really want to change the colors too much. Usually, I go a slightly fantasy and make lots of funny oranges and things like that. But this time, I wanted to keep it fairly traditional. Watching this now, I'm watching this back and talking over it, because talking and painting is very difficult, and I still can't do it. But the blue of the lake is really bugging me. I will fix it, but it's very wrong. So one thing to realize is that if you think of a big expanse of water, if it isn't moving, then it's basically a mirror to the sky. So it has to take the exact same color as the sky, or it doesn't make any sense. So if you notice now, it's a dark blue, but it's the wrong color. So that really can't happen unless it was something weird going on. I'm sure it can happen, but it should be the same as the sky. But anything on the ground is always darker. So just take the sky color, put it into the water, and make it a little bit darker. I'm hoping that I fix this, and I'm pretty sure I do. So I wouldn't worry about that now. So reflections wise, water is very strange, and I'm not going to say it's easy to paint. It's not. But when you're doing reflections, don't try and be too accurate with them, because the water, even if it's not moving, distorts it quite a lot. So don't worry about being too accurate. Okay, so you can see the main part of what I'm doing here now is I duplicated the mountain, flipped it. Make sure you turn snap in and magnets on, so it stays in line, which is a nice feature in Procreate. And drop it down into the water. And you don't have to be that accurate, to be honest. You just want a nice mirror. And I've used motion blur to make it a little bit blurry. Even if your water is completely perfectly still, it will still be a little bit blurry, because it can't be perfectly still, obviously. There'll be a bit of movement. And so here, when I was talking about I have too many layers, I'm messing around with the layers here, and I've moved things and lost things and had to do it again. So this is kind of why I try and minimize my layers. So I end up having to do all these shadows again. So these dark bits of the trees, is one thing to keep in mind with trees is they're actually really, really dark. 9 times out of 10. Okay, you get, some of the super colorful trees, but generally they're not. And when they reflect into the water, they're really, really dark. So almost black, to be honest. So just keep things really dark for trees, especially pine trees. Pine trees are very dark. I'm not very good with trees, to be honest. Pine trees is probably the only trees I actually know. So they're very dark. But I fixed the water somewhat. The color is still a bit off, actually. But I'm pretty sure I fixed that and notice it. As I've said in my other videos, the good thing about just this style of painting quickly is you get mistakes quickly. And having lots of problems is the best part to be in, because you can fix them. And it's mostly about seeing the problem and knowing what to do about it. But even if you don't know what to do about it, the fact you know something is off is a good thing, because right, okay, just try things. And because the apps are so good at adjusting things, you've got a chance to just try something and see what looks nice. There's one trick I don't do very often here, which maybe I should, is sometimes I just zoom out really, really far. So the picture is tiny. So it's like an inch big. And then it gives you a different perspective of it. And you can kind of see if it's working or not. Because in landscape paintings, the details are not important. You need them, to create interest, but they're not important and they don't really change the composition of the painting. So zoom all the way out and see, does it work as a tiny little thumbnail? So I guess that's me doing my thumbnails, is I kind of do it after the fact rather than before, where people would maybe do the thumbnail first. I prefer to do the painting and then zoom out and I can see the thumbnail and is it working? And if it's not, what's wrong? And it'll be the big shapes. It won't be the little details. So obviously, when you zoom out really far, you can't see the details. So you concentrate on the big elements and what's wrong. So I'm trying to do the foreground now, and I was going to put some flowers in this. I always like to add flowers, and I want to talk about this a little bit actually because I didn't like it. So I made a mistake there and kind of lost it anyway. Sometimes because I paint quick, I accidentally undo and lose stuff. So I was trying to do some pink reddish flowers, but kind of blobby. So I wanted, like, they were all compact and there was loads of them, and I'm going to delete this in a second because they just don't work. And I think with this style, blobs of flowers don't work. So again, I created another problem, and I was trying my best to fix it. And sometimes fixing it is deleting. So there we go, it's gone. Didn't like that at all. So it's still good to try things though, and you can see me pause there and think, is okay, well that didn't work. So what didn't work? It didn't work because it was a big blob, and I noticed flowers, for me, with this style, they need to be very individual. So I started again. I went yellow this time. Not entirely sure why, to be honest. But add a bunch more. One thing when you're doing these flowers is you got to think about the angles that they create. Sometimes they're very straight on, if that makes sense. So you can't actually see the flowers, so they're kind of flat. So they come out like a little line eventually. So I'm just adding detail here. I wanted pink flowers, actually, no red, so I fixed that after the fact. I really do not concentrate on colors. I pick kind of the value of the color I want, but even that I can change. So don't get caught up in what color should this be, because you can change it. As long as if you're in doubt of what color you want, just make a new layer and put it on a new layer, and then you can change the color later. Well, you can change everything. I mean, you can change the value and color and everything. So just try and not get out of the flow and not choose or get stuck in what you want to do with the choice, because it's so easy to change things now. It's not really worth worrying about it too much. So obviously there's things to worry about, and that's the major shapes, the major big shapes. That's the thing to worry about. Do they look nice? Do they make sense? And does it make a nice composition? So the one thing about doing a lake is a kind of a compositional problem, is they kind of split the painting in two. So you've got the upper section with the mountain and the sky, the hills, etc. And then you have the lake right in the middle, and then you have the bottom section. If you notice, it kind of splits the painting up, which is not so great. So it kind of makes a composition that is not so fun for us to look at. But there's a couple of ways around that. I could have done that. So usually you need a lead into the painting, which means we could have had a little path going to the lake, or the lake could have spilt out down the front, and it'd be a little stream or something like that. That would have worked too. but you got to be a bit careful with lakes. And this one isn't so bad because you got to be careful not to make it go straight off the canvas, and make sure then that it's not like a big rectangle. So avoid the rectangle shape and break it up if you can. Again, it's all about the nice shapes. So make sure the shapes are interesting, and then you got a good chance. So I'm doing my usual thing. I toyed with the idea of not doing the messy background for a change and just leaving it like this. Maybe put a vignette on it, but I thought, yeah, let's do it anyway. You can always undo it, so I didn't really have to do the border, but I quite like doing the border, so I'll stick with the style. It makes it kind of unique. So here's me fixing little bits. But now it's just the fiddly stage. I didn't add too many effects this time. It's not that sunny, so I couldn't really do the sun rays that I do quite often. I like to do the sunny skies actually, but it didn't really work for this one. Well, I made the decision early on just to have a fairly flat sky with lots of clouds, so I didn't really want to kind of retrofit a sun and then add rays and things like that. So I kept it fairly simple. And I did say in one of my videos the other day that I wanted to put more life in there, like sheep and cows and deer and whatnot, but I didn't really see an opportunity to do that this time. I've only got like a couple of places in the front that I could have put them, or way back, and you probably wouldn't see them. So it doesn't always make sense to do the same things every time. So make a call what fits the painting you're doing right now. So we're coming to the end. I'm just finishing off here with a few highlights and things like that, but nothing too significant. And I think we'll leave it there. So I quite like this one. This was fun. Nice traditional one. If you liked it, subscribe and give me a like, and I'll see you in the next one.